Welcome to Heart Conversations. My name is Abhijit Joshi. During this unprecedented time of pandemic, I personally felt a loss of deep human connection. Sitting with that feeling, I thought what I could do about it. From that, I got the idea about heart conversations for bringing people together. It gives us a platform where we get to know the stories of the amazing people around us. We get to know what shaped them into who they are today. It is our goal to foster deep connection and inspiration by presenting stories never told before. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to everybody. This is Heart to Heart Candid Conversations. Heart to Heart is an opportunity for us to get to know some of the people around us in a much more personal way. My name is Solarzar, and today I'll be speaking with Michael Hoynotsky. Welcome, Michael. Good to see you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome.
You're very welcome. Now, I first met Michael back in 1999 when he was Sergeant at Arms at Pajaro Valley Toastmasters, which met at West Marine in Watsonville, California. Now, since that time, Michael has used his Toastmaster experience to not only expand his speaking skills, but also to change his profession. And I'm certain there's some change of his life as well. Now, before we talk with Michael, I want to share a little background. Michael was originally born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and he moved to California at the age of 7 with his family. And he began his own printing business at the age of 23. And he's been an Aikido sensei for 16 years, as well as a Toastmaster for 22 years. He's been married for 40 years to his wife, Maureen, has 2 children. And we'll talk a little bit more about them as we go along. So, Michael, what I'd like to know first, as you were growing up and having this variety of experiences, what was the most important influence that helped you role model the type of person you wanted to be?
I think both my mother and father had such a profound influence on my life. My mother was very outgoing, wanted to be the center of the stage, the center of the show. My father, on the other hand, was a deeply reflective person. I remember being 7 years old. Well, we're sitting on this plaza and there's people from all over the world, all walks of life passing before us. My father said, we're gonna people watch. People watch? I'm 7 years old, what's people watch? So see all these people, Michael? They come in every shape and size from all corners of the earth, but they all want the same thing. They want to be loved, appreciated, and have the feeling that their work has importance, meaning, and value. He didn't speak a lot, but when he did, I paid attention. And that really gave me such insights that I still think about today. To accept people, that all people are seeking love, acceptance, and the feeling that their work has value and meaning.
What a beautiful piece of wisdom. And the most profound wisdom is always the simplest. You know, I mentioned in the beginning, you've been married for over 40 years to Maureen, and that's a record that deserves applause because so many people just don't seem to make it that far. What first attracted you to Maureen, and how have you evolved your relationship over those 40 years?
I first met Maureen in a college class. We were both trying to add a photography class, and she was standing in line in front of me. I didn't even really know what she looked like, but there was something about her. Little did I know, a few years later, we ended up married. How has our marriage evolved? Oh, tremendously, tremendously. I used to think I was right all the time. It took me about 10 years of marriage before I figured out I wasn't always right. And one of our mutual friends, Pam, said, you know, Michael, most husbands don't figure that out. I realized that even though I wanted things, it was more important to honor the relationship. And then once we decided upon something, we would both be pulling in the same direction instead of against one another.
Do you think that that whole direction helps shift your own approach to dealing with other people and other situations?
That and learning Aikido, the Japanese martial art of Aiki, which is the way of harmony. Being with Maureen really taught me that when you live in a household, everyone has responsibilities. And Maureen was very wise. When our children were young, 7 or 8 years old, She said, well, we all live here. What would you like to do to contribute? Well, they were tall enough to fold the clothes
Yeah.
or clean their room or do something. And to this day, that continues. Each person makes a contribution in what they would love to do or how they would like to show their appreciation for one another. And that's followed through all these years.
Most people have a profound experience about the birth of a child. What was that initial rush, feeling, or shift in you that occurred the first time you saw or held Amanda?
I felt a great sense of responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I've been given a great gift to care for another human being. As a father, I realize I've continually developed, and I try to always become a better father. The other day, I told my son, Alex, I said, "You're a great son, Alex." And he says, "You're a great dad." And I said, "Well, I'm trying to get better."
Yeah.
He says, "You're always trying to get better." But it's true. I always try to become a better human being, to be better for him, for Maureen and Amanda.
But in that process too, when you're becoming a better human being, I imagine still there's a part that's first, I want to be a better human being and I want to be able to share that with the others as opposed to external in. So many people try external in instead of internal out. And my experience with you is that you try to deal from the internal out.
I do. I realize if there's a problem in my life, I have to realize, how am I creating that problem? What role am I playing? There's an old story of Gandhi who he was at home and a mother brought her little girl to Gandhi because she was eating too many sweets and she has to stop eating so many sweets because it's bad for her health. Now the mother and daughter walked for 2 days to see him, hoping for some words of wisdom. He said, "Bring her back in a week." They went home, they walked back the next week, another 2-day trip. Gandhi turned to the little girl and said, "Stop eating so many sweets." And the mother said, "What in the world? You could have told her that last week." And Gandhi, he said, "I had to give up sweets myself first."
He couldn't prepare the lesson without doing it for himself first. He couldn't share that. That's obviously the wisdom of Gandhi. Was there any shift after Alex was born? Did that increase that responsibility for you? Did that shift your whole approach to your own life when that second child was born?
It did. The family was growing. He was born about 1.5 years later. So now you have 2 children. We would often turn to them and not tell them what to do, but give them guidance and say, "This is what we would like. You two have to figure it out." Sometimes that worked, and sometimes it didn't, to be quite honest. But it was different than telling them what to do.
As a parent, it sounds as if you're very accepting, but directive in a very kind way. Did that shift your overall approach to other people?
Absolutely. I think everything is interwoven. The family we have, we get to practice the most with because we live with them, right?
Yes.
But then when we go out, we realize the same principles work with everyone else. How we accept people. Are we accepting? Are we not accepting? We might think that we're very accepting of others. Well, socially, I accepted them. I said everything exactly the way I should. I stood the way I stood. I acknowledged them. I did proper listening skills and active listening. However, they're so walled off from actually making a heart-to-heart connection, you feel like they're pushing you away or holding you at a distance. So what I realized, if you greet them with an open heart or you greet them with a sense of loving acceptance, they just open up. They feel like you've created such a comfort zone for them that then they express themselves freely. It makes developing relationships much easier. And even if the relationship doesn't go in the direction you would like, at least you haven't had the stress from when there's conflict.
But the nature of life is conflict. We grow through conflict, we scale through conflict, we learn through conflict. But what I would like to know from your experience is how you felt learning to deal within the family conflict unit may have given you insights on dealing outside with other people.
I realized that conflict begins with me. because I'm perceiving conflict.
Hmm.
Even if I think, wow, this is a difficult situation, I'm the one deciding it's a difficult situation. And the other thing is, I realize often that there's conflict because people don't feel that they've been heard. I was once in a meeting with someone, and the one person at the meeting, he had the habit of driving his points forward very strongly. And of course, when someone does that with a lot of emotion, people pull back, right?
Mm-hmm.
To protect ourselves, self-protection. So what I did, and this is an Aikido technique, I was sitting fairly near him. I leaned in closer to him and I paused and I said, I see how important this is to you. And then he looked at me like, wow, somebody heard me. It
Mm-hmm.
interrupted his train of thought. And then we went forward from there. We moved forward in a new direction.
Well, you've mentioned the Aikido several times, and I know Morihei Ueshiba, who's the founder of Aikido, said it's about the purification of the self. It's called the way of the unifying life energy, or even the way of the harmonious spirit. So what was it that drew you to Aikido?
I spent many years as a competitive swimmer,
Mm-hmm.
and I got tired of going back and forth in the pool, 50 meters. I spent years doing it, swimming 3,000 to 5,000 yards a day. And then there was an ad in the paper, Aikido or Judo. I just had a feeling about Aikido. So I joined, I became the top student very quickly, achieved my black belt certificate, ended up teaching 40 students in about 5 years' time. I had to learn how to teach. I had to learn how to speak or present my ideas. The huge shift. And what I ended up doing in the beginning, I focused on the technique because it's a technical martial art. However, as I went on, what happened was I worked on the energetic or the spiritual side of the art, which is called ki development. So understanding the flow and energy in a relationship, whether it's someone that's moving towards you with a sword or someone pressing forcefully in an argument, we learn how to be neutral and redirect that energy into a positive outcome. So it's the whole interplay of, I like to think, compassionate human interaction.
And my understanding, and I may have this wrong, is that Morihei Ueshiba did not actually consider it a martial art in the truest sense. It was meant really to work with the other person's energy and de-escalate a situation as opposed to escalate, compete, or even win.
The techniques can be very martial, but it's the spiritual or the energetic relationship between people that we are studying through the experience of the techniques. That's what we're learning how to do, how to openly accept someone when they're being negative or hostile and to redirect. It also teaches us how to stay centered and calm in stressful situations.
Well, it would seem from listening to you, Michael, that there's two things I'd like to point out that may or may not be so, but they just seem to be coming through. Is one, that you had an intuitive sense of selecting the life partner that you're still a life partner with. And the second thing is, when you chose to go into Aikido, it was something that actually fit you very internally, very intuitively, as a philosophy that was adaptable to the lifestyle that you were looking to do. So do you find that you have a great sense, a great intuitive sense for making appropriate choices from inner guidance, or were these just two that you happened to make well and you have a whole resume of ones you didn't?
Yes, and yes. Well, what's interesting is Maureen is very intuitive, and it's always important to marry up. So what I did was I married someone of higher consciousness. She taught me the value of developing my intuition. And Maureen has always said that in any communication, so much of the communication happens intuitively before people even speak.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't realize that. Unconsciously, we look at someone, we have a sense or a feeling, are they safe to approach? Do they look like a happy person? And then we approach them and strike up a conversation. But I would say throughout my life, I've learned to follow the intuition and take those chances, even when I didn't think I had the skills or ability to understand. Opening up a printing business at 23 years old is not something people just do.
Yeah.
My father-in-law said, don't worry, you'll fail in a year and a half, and then you can go on and get a real job. However, he was always supportive through the 33 years we ran that business.
Yeah.
So following the intuition is important. Even if I didn't understand completely where it was going, there was always people to help me, always people to support me. And you see that all the time in Toastmasters, actually.
And now that you've introduced Toastmasters again into our conversation, I should mention you pointed out to me that you joined Toastmasters because of the training you were doing in Aikido and the teaching of students, and you wanted to learn to do that better. But you also said you wanted to speak better about your people, solving people problems. So in your experience as a sensei, as a teacher of Aikido, what people problems or what situations did you encounter that led you to say, I want to be able to speak better about this and share this with people?
It's interesting because I stayed with teaching the techniques and the principles behind them. I had mostly adult students. And what they were doing was I found out they were solving problems in their life. So they had the ability to develop better relationships or have less stress at home in their own families. And they were the ones that encouraged me to speak in the corporate world. They said, you have to take what you're teaching here and repackage it and teach it, because you're solving problems in Silicon Valley that people are afraid to speak about. Their company might be listed as one of the best companies to work for in the world. And when you meet them privately, they say, I cannot stand that woman on the second floor. Or I cannot stand my manager. So I find out that in teaching the club officer trainings, I actually ended up solving most of their people problems at work.
Has there been any element of Toastmasters, your experience in the last 22 years, that has exceptionally enhanced by, I mean, it's a whole different level than what you were experiencing before in your approach to people, places, and things and how you live your life?
I would say taking on all of the leadership roles that I have had. Some of them that may seem simple. O-sensei used to say, put your shoes straight by the door when you come into the dojo. He wasn't talking about straightening your shoes at the door. He was speaking about bringing order to your entire life. Toastmasters is the same way. A lot of times new members take on the role of sergeant at arms. All you do is you welcome people. That can be an incredible opportunity to stand in front of everyone and make people feel welcome. That's a skill that runs through every relationship in our life.
To date, what do you think your greatest successes in life have been?
Finding Maureen. Finding Maureen, definitely.
Had to be a big one.
Huge, huge. The other thing is, I had a huge conflict with someone that worked with my printing business in the beginning. And the problem was, I took out my frustrations on this person and then fired him. I felt tremendous guilt over that for over a decade. So I had tremendous conflict with this person. Well, just because, he didn't show up for work, little things like that. And I had to learn to forgive myself. So because I was in Toastmasters, I created an audio program on forgiveness. And until I learned how to truly forgive, I think that helped me to learn how to love. And to bring love to even my casual conversations and people I meet. So learning how to forgive is about learning how to love for me. That's been a great success.
I share a belief with you on that. I think the greatest lesson in forgiveness is that we try to forgive the other person, but we never forgive ourselves. Therefore, we never forgive. Have you been able to incorporate that into some of your Toastmaster speaking or some of your other speaking when you share with these Silicon Valley companies?
Yes, absolutely. Once I was sharing a story with an audience of something that was a difficult situation for me and how I chose not to be angry and to forgive them. And there was a woman in the back of the audience that stood up and said, "For what they did to you, you have every right to be angry. You should just tell them what you really think." And she stood up and walked out.
Yeah.
And then everyone else looked at me. "Well, what are you going to say?" And I said, "You know what? I tried anger. There wasn't much future in it.
Yeah.
It was ruining my life. So I chose love or acceptance instead of anger. And I did have to learn to forgive myself.
Mm-hmm.
I had to also realize that people come into my life to help me and to help me to learn how to forgive, to not beat ourselves up, or as I say, get caught in the loop of repetitive negativity. We get caught in that and we stay with it. There's an old story about a gentleman who went to see his master. And he said, "Master, why is there so much hate and violence in the world?" And the master said, "Do you ever feel anger or hate toward others?" And he goes, "Well, I'm a peaceful person, but yeah, sometimes I do." And he says, "Well, that's why there's still hate and violence in the world."
Mm.
We contribute to it. We tie into that psychically or intuitively, however you want to phrase it, that if we choose love, we connect to all of the love there is in the world, or forgiveness. If we choose anger or hate, we're connecting to that frequency of thinking, emotion, and energy.
Yeah. And in a polarized world as we live in right now, I think sometimes we're all unconscious about our contribution to that polarity, whether we're doing something literally or not. Thinking back to the type of person you wanted to become when you were growing up, what type of person have you become? And what do you think the differences are that may have happened as you evolved through all of these experiences in your life?
I'm a much better person than I thought I would be. Growing up, I would say I had a limited vision of what was possible for me. And I think that comes from the family, your teachers, your friends, your siblings. Certainly, I have two older brothers. Of course, they tell you what's possible for you all the time, right? And then growing up, I think my image has changed by the confidence I've gained in how I relate to others.
Mm-hmm.
So by gaining confidence in how I think and communicate with others, and then I pay close attention to how people respond to me. Sometimes you walk up to someone and say, "Hi," and they look at you like, "Who are you?" And they walk away. Okay, well, they weren't open to receiving a hello. Other people you walk up to and they turn toward you and open, and they're the first ones to go, "Hi," and greet you with that acceptance. So I pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to how people respond to what I'm thinking, which gets back to adjusting my communication style to how people receive me and to their style of communication. It all goes hand in hand.
You know, you mentioned leadership in Toastmasters, obviously, where leaders are made, the motto of Toastmasters International. But a big part of the service leadership of Toastmasters is the mentoring of others. What would you share as the most important guidance to assist them in their growth if you were sitting someone down as a blank slate and had the opportunity to share some wisdom? What would it be?
First, I would listen and find out there's the surface level of what's important to them, but what's truly under that? What do they truly want to accomplish? I want to be a better speaker. Why? Well, so I develop confidence. Why? Well, so I can share my story of growing up and how I overcame difficulty. Okay, that's what they're really aiming for, is sharing their story and improving the lives of others.
So it seems from what you're saying, Michael, that in connecting with people, you feel two things are certainly important. One is listening. And the next thing is that we try to also listen from the heart. We're trying to listen to understand them in a certain way. If somebody is trying to develop that skill, how would you suggest to them they learn to, one, listen more effectively, and two, learn to listen from the heart? What would be recommendations you would have?
Just practice seeing the best in others. So often, humans are so visual. We look at people, oh, that person's taller, that one's not as tall, this person looks like that, or the color shirt they have on. we take in so much information visually, we forget to tune into how does that person feel?
Mhm.
Do they feel like a safe person to speak with or to communicate with? So I would first say, learn how to understand and accept that person. And the more we learn to love ourselves, which gets back to forgiveness, the more we are able to love others.
Mhm.
And in loving others, we're able to greet them and see the best in them. One day our neighbor came to our house and she was just complaining. I spent this money on an expensive item. I sent it to my daughter. The package was destroyed. I'm out all this money and the gift. She was really upset. And I looked past it and I kind of laughed. And she goes, "You're laughing at me," which I have to admit was a little out of place. But I said, look at what the value was in that gift. And your daughter knows what happened. She's impressed by how far you went out of your way to do something special for her. The gift can be replaced. And now she knows for sure how much you truly accept and love and appreciate her.
If I were to sum up your philosophy, and you could let me know if this is right, I think 1, it's listen. 2, it's love. 3, it's trust. And then there's another element that's never been mentioned, and that is be with the moment. Because I do think you tend to approach the moment without a whole lot of preconceived intention of how the moment would be. Is there anything else that you would consider your philosophy of life as it's evolved to this moment in time?
Be open to the changes that happen in life. They're happening, but greet them with expectation, positive expectation. It's the old story of the farmer was in his field and a young man walks up in the morning and says, "What kind of people live in this town?" "Well, what kind of people live in the town where you come from?" "Oh, the most obstinate, cranky people, judgmental." The farmer says, "Well, you'll find the same people in this town." Later in the afternoon, another young man walks by, asks the farmer, "What kind of people live in this town?" "Well, what kind of town do you come from?" "Oh, I come from the most loving, compassionate town, and the world seems so full of love." He says, "Well, that's the kind of people that live in this town."
Hmm.
So often we find what we expect to find, and then life has a way of fulfilling what we think we're looking for. From my Aikido experience, which is truly for me about compassionate human interaction, I see all of society developing. All of us are raising our consciousness. From the story I told about my father earlier on, that was about diversity, inclusion, and belonging, right? I used to respond with a lot of anger towards some people. And I realize now that when I see someone who's angry, I don't get upset. So I'm able to stay calm and centered and ask them what they need. "What do you need?" Or, "Wow, I once felt like that. I know what that's like."
An interesting point about anger I've always felt is they've said that anger is like trying to kill someone else by drinking the poison yourself. And that's one of the things it does. It eats us out. So, Michael, I want to thank you for sharing yourself, your philosophy, your thoughts, and your you with us today. We wish you all good health and many blessings. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.